Hello, Brian. Hello, Jason.
Hi, Haley. Hi, Jason. Jason, thanks a lot for joining our podcast. Haley and I are really excited that you're here with us. Um, Haley, just a quick introduction, and also Jason. Maybe I wrote this to you, but Haley and I connected f 5 years ago. Haley,
Oh gosh.
I
Yeah.
think I think more than that. And we started talking. We said, well, why don't we record this? So suddenly we had a podcast. And Haley is grew up in Zimbabwe,
Yep.
born in the U.S.
Born in the
uh,
US, raised in Zimbabwe.
and spent time on Wall Street. She was a Wall
Mhm.
Streeter, and she now is a energy guide. Is that an accurate description?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's clairvoyant and clair everything. Um, I told her it was a great drag name, and Jason's title Jack, or Jason Jack, uh, or Jason, is uh, Catholic, a gay Catholic theologian, and he works at a Catholic college. What's the name of the college, Jason?
St. Joseph's University in New York.
And they didn't fire you when you got married?
Thank God, no, no. I didn't even have to be discreet about it. I was able to talk
Awesome.
about it freely. My colleagues were all very accepting, very affirming. Um, some of them even took me out to eat to celebrate my wedding. And
Ah,
yeah, the Sisters of St. Joseph who founded the university have been really, really great. I've been able to partner with them over the last few years to work on LGBTQ affirming initiatives of their own, but then also working through some of these issues at the university itself.
and do you have any need to fly under the radar so that the bishop doesn't decide he doesn't want a openly gay um, professor teaching as a theologian?
Thank God not. My department is technically a religious studies department, so we're not technically a theology department. I don't need to have a mandatum, which is a bishop's certificate of approval for a theologian who teaches traditional Catholic theology. I have a lot of leverage, and as a layperson too. You know, I'm not a priest. I'm not uh, a member of a religious order, so I don't have to necessarily fall in line with any particular religious sensibility. I'm not obedient to the bishop. I openly dissent from church teaching. And thank God I've been able to be completely myself and completely open about who I am, even in my marriage with my husband, Damien. A couple years ago, right after Pope Francis allowed priests to not blame, that's a
Right.
bless same sex couples.
Freudian slip there.
My husband and I were blessed in a very, very public way. Our picture ended up in the New York Times. Um,
Wow.
and so, thank God I've been able to be open about who I am, have had very, very little in the way of obstacles for my public theology.
Does your husband uh, fully get and support your work?
Yes, I think sometimes when I get caught up in the church's controversies and what's going on, he encourages me to step back and say, Jason, just is it who you are? Your self-worth doesn't depend on the church. Your life is much bigger. And he helps to put everything in perspective, which has been a real gift because he
It
wasn't
is.
raised in the church. And for him, it's a whole lot of nothing. So
Hey,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Haley.
I was just wanting to know, Jason, what is your work? I know we're throwing around words like theology, religion, and professor, but what would you describe as your work and sort of
yeah,
your passion?
so I describe myself as a gay Catholic theologian, and so to sort of parse those words out, I am Catholic. I'm part of Catholic communities. I'm responsible to Catholic communities. I do my theological reflection, my writing from Catholic perspectives using Catholic tradition and culture and history. Um, my work as a gay man is advocacy within the LGBTQ movement that is attempting to move the church forward on a lot of these issues. So I've been involved with grassroots groups, local ministries like Out at St. Paul's, which is located in Manhattan, seeks to build an inclusive community in a local Catholic parish setting. I've also been involved with national groups like Fortunate Families, which is an educational community organization ministry that's, again, moving the Catholic Church forward on some of these issues. So it has to do with advocacy, it has to do with ministry, meeting with people one-on-one who are struggling to reconcile their LGBTQ and religious identities. It also has to do with intentional theological reflection. So the word theology is the study of God. So it's asking, where does God show up in these different circumstances? Where is God working in the world today? Where is God working in the Catholic Church today? And as a gay Catholic theologian, I see LGBTQ perspectives as especially important to the Church, as especially important to the work of theology, of discerning who God is, where God is working in human hearts. Because for so long we've been excluded and we've been denied the opportunity to share our stories. So personally, I work a lot in history. I find history so illuminating of how people experience God, especially within the context of Catholic community. I got to know Brian that way. Brian was a character at first in one of my books, but then I got to meet him firsthand and hear some of his stories. And so I find LGBTQ Catholic history to be so encouraging, precisely because this work of ministry and advocacy been going on for decades, even if the Church has obscured it or we haven't been able to hear about it very much. So that's sort of my research and advocacy, but for my bread and butter job, I teach classes at St. Joseph's University. I'm a full-time professor. I teach a 4-4 load, 4 classes each semester, and I teach a little bit of everything because we are a small school.
Jason, do you see yourself doing this long term, or have you thought about what else might you do related to your qualifications?
Yeah, we'll see. I'll tell you, right now I'm in a job that is not tenure track. So I'm on a year-to-year contract, and that makes my work feel precarious in some ways. The academy right now is not doing very well either. There are fewer and fewer students going to college. A lot of schools are really struggling. And so I try to hold on to the current iteration of my work with a light hand, right? I don't want to grasp onto it because I know that I might need to move very quickly into something else. So I've thought of ministry, maybe even ordained ministry. Within the Catholic Church, that wouldn't be a possibility, so it might be in another denomination. I've thought of non-denominational ministry. So just recently I got certified to officiate weddings, wondering what that form of ministry might look like.
You paid your $79 and got the laminated card that said universal.
That's right.
I'm with you. I have that.
I have it too.
Yeah, and it's primarily for me, it's for taxes.
Well, and you know, it's so silly though to think that formal denomination should have a hold or be able to control where God is working in our world. You know, and I actually do take the ministry of the Universal Life Church seriously in the sense that it reveals that God is at work in all of us at all times. And, you know, an MDiv degree doesn't necessarily show that or isn't necessarily proof of it. And being recognized by what we would describe as a traditional denomination isn't either. Like, God is at work in all of us. And thank God that there are these avenues that we can minister and be present to people in different ways.
With that, Jason, why Catholicism for you? What about that aspect of religion speaks to you?
Yeah, so I grew up an evangelical Protestant. So this isn't my home tradition. I am a convert.
Oh.
Yeah. For undergrad, I went away to Georgetown University. I wanted to be a big politician. And then while it was there where I sort of discovered Catholicism as a viable living form of Christian faith. And I picked up theology as a second major and fell in love with the tradition. I fell in love at that time. I was, late teens, early 20s, and being exposed to new ideas for the first time, I was looking for truth, capital T, right? I wanted certainty. This is the church that was established by Christ. This is the church that has passed down the tradition, right? That has been revealed by God throughout the ages. So that was what I was looking for when I first joined the church. It was before I was really dealing with questions of my own sexuality. I wasn't out to myself. I wasn't out to the world. I still expected to marry a woman and have a very large contraceptive-free family, right? This is the vision for my future. Other things that drew me to the church, though, I really fell in love with the tradition's understanding of sacramentality, that God would be present in this world through physical objects. In the tradition that I grew up in, we saw, say, baptism, the water of baptism, as being something symbolic, right? Or the bread and wine of communion as just being bread and wine. But I saw a really, really beautiful thing in the Catholic belief, and it's an incarnational belief that God enters into the world and works through physical things, people, places, objects, right, to communicate God's grace and goodness to us.
Yes.
And it sort of makes the entire world holy, makes the entire world permeated by God's presence. And so I really, really fell in love with that part of the Catholic tradition. The aesthetics, strangely enough, going into a Catholic church, you see statues and icons and stained glass windows, and there's so much beauty. The beauty of the liturgy, the beauty of the prayers, which again were so strange to me growing up or coming from an evangelical setting. Today, whenever I go to a Catholic church, I could stare at the stained glass windows forever because I didn't have that growing up, right? It was all whitewashed walls and a very simple pulpit up front. So to have images and along with that, these images represent the communion of saints, right? A tradition that's 2,000 years old, belonging to a community that has spanned countless places, countless times, is such a gift. I will say, although I became Catholic looking for truth, capital T, with time, my experience sort of collided, right, with the church's teaching, especially on matters of sexual ethics. In my mid-20s, I finally figured out that I was gay, and I really began to struggle with the tradition, right? The church teaches that same-sex genital activities are intrinsically disordered, that they go against God's plan for the human person, that they're destructive to the human soul. And so it took several years of prayer, of discernment, right, to figure that out, that actually being gay and Catholic is really great. It's a beautiful thing. It's a life-giving thing. It helps me live out my vocation as a theologian, as a human being. I found that I would flourish in a same-sex relationship, right? That everything bad I'd heard about being gay, being partnered, wasn't true at all. Mm-hmm. And then the more I studied church history too, the more I realized how messy the church's history is. The fact that the church has gotten a lot of things wrong in the past. Slavery, colonialism, the treatment of women, right? And that the church evolves, it changes over time as it begins to understand better and better where God is at work in the world. And so it really enabled me to hold on to my Catholic faith today, to recognize that as an adult with a conscience, I get to decide which parts of the tradition I hold on to, which parts I'm going to let go, which parts are unhealthy, which parts are harmful, even to me as a gay man. And I found that there are a lot of liberating or life-giving parts of the tradition that enable me to remain within it. One of the gifts of Catholic theology is that it's 2,000 years old. It is so broad. It is so vast. There are so many resources. And those can be really, really helpful, especially for LGBTQ liberation in our current day.
Isn't he articulate, Haley?
I'm so drawn into your speaking. I'm just like,
yeah. We had a great interview that we did for Dignity and New Ways Ministry and for the Gay and Lesbian Religious Archives. So, Jason, I'm learning some things about you that I didn't know. And I want to say before that, Haley, Jason doesn't know this, but I have him under wing. So I'm here for him, if he's looking for an ear. But Jason, you didn't know you were gay when you were little. You were bisexual, or did you really think you were straight?
I really thought I was straight. Growing up in an evangelical context, sometimes you don't even have the frame of reference to understand what it means to be gay. You don't have the rhetorical tools, you don't have the relational tools. It's a non-possibility, right? And growing up, I knew that I was attracted to guys, right? But in the evangelical world and in the Catholic world, sometimes the traditionalist Catholic world, it's framed as same-sex attraction, right? It's not framed as a fundamental identity, as this is who I am, this is who God created me to be. It's a temptation, right? If I indulge in it, it becomes a sin, but it's something that I can repent of. It's something that I can turn away from. It's not going to determine the future of my life, right? And of course, growing up, I mean, there were indications that I was attracted to guys, who I was fantasizing about, even some things that I was doing with guys my age at the time. But it was always, well, when I get older, I'm going to get married to a woman. I won't deal with these urges anymore, and I'm going to go on to live a heteronormative life.
And you're an anomaly to me in that most converts are very, very conservative about the church. They're more Catholic than people born Catholic. They just are gun ho on everything. And that's not you. You didn't get sucked into that. How come? Because of your theology studies?
Well, I'll tell you, when I first became Catholic, I was a Catholic fundamentalist. I went from being an evangelical fundamentalist to being a Catholic fundamentalist.
Okay.
Because when I was confirmed, as all converts from Protestantism do, we make an oath, or a proclamation of our faith, right? I believe and accept all that the Catholic Church teaches, preaches, and believes to be revealed by God. So it's sort of take it or leave it in toto, right? But as time went on, again, my own experience and my learning about the church's tradition and the messiness of the tradition began to challenge a lot of those things that I had proclaimed to be fundamentally true when I joined the church. As a historian, as a theologian, I get to see how the sausage is made, and sometimes it's not very pretty, right? And so that deconstructed my fundamentalism in a lot of fundamental ways. I couldn't continue being a fundamentalist knowing what I'd come to know. And so then the question becomes, well, what do I hold on to me? What is important from within this tradition? What is life-giving to me from within this tradition? What is useful? And then what can I get rid of? What should I get rid of? What should I excise from my life?
Jason, you mentioned earlier sort of the evolution of the church, and I think what you're speaking about too is the evolution of you. And when you're talking about sort of your idea of theology and God, and that the connection with Catholicism is that you get to see God in the physical. God is everywhere and uses different sort of modalities to be with somebody. How do you reconcile that with when things go horribly wrong, or what seemingly go horribly wrong? Where is God in those situations? And does evolution come into that?
I think you're absolutely right that my understanding of God has evolved with my own experiences as a person, right? Accepting the God who I know has come with accepting myself as a gay man. And the more confident I am as a gay man, the more confident I am in my belief in God and that God is present in my own experiences. So where is God in the hard times, in the suffering, in the evil? This is a really hard question. This is a question that theologians, apologists for religion have wrestled with for millennia, really. I'm of the persuasion that there aren't any good answers to those questions. And when we try to answer them, oftentimes we cheapen the suffering, we cheapen the pain, right, that people actually do experience. So I'm one who doesn't like to say, oh, God has a plan for everything.
Mhm.
I don't know if God does, right? I don't, and I think for most theologians, the Holocaust is sort of the prime example. I don't think God had a plan for the Holocaust. I don't know if there's anything that good that came out of the concentration camps, right? And I'm certainly not one to look for that, right? Or to explain
Mhm.
it away or to give a justification or to defend God in those circumstances. The one thing that I do hold on to, though, from my Christian tradition, from my faith, number one, and this comes from Hebrew tradition as well. Number one, God sees human suffering, right? And God is moved by human suffering. So God cares. When God sees hurt, suffering, evil unfolding in the world, God cares. God enters into it, right? This is the Christian belief in the incarnation, that God becomes a human being, enters into our messiness, experiences oppression in God's self, right? Jesus Christ in Christian tradition is crucified under empire, right? He is treated as a criminal, as the lowest of the low. He enters into that reality of injustice, of pain, of everything going wrong. Um, and so God is present too, I believe, when there is human suffering. And again, I don't have any good answers for how God can do that or why God does that and then doesn't change the situation, right? But I guess another big part of the Christian story is that there is redemption through the suffering or after the suffering. And again, that's not to justify the suffering, that's not to say that it's okay, but there is resurrection at the end of it, or there is a promise of life, right, and light, and that ultimately God entering into human suffering means that suffering can be transformed or is transformed when the story is all told at the end. And so that's a hope, and it's an unrealized hope. And the fact that that's an unrealized hope is incredibly painful in the day to day. But it's sort of one of the challenges of being human, I think.
Mhm.
Jason, you said the church believes that uh, God is in all living things, right? And that's, I would, that, I believe that. I believe that every, that it's not a matter of God entering, that God was always there because, we share in that divinity equally. And if that's true, that divinity was in Hitler and that divinity is in Donald Trump. And we have to explain to ourselves and to others that just because it's there doesn't mean the person realizes it or has activated it and may die never having come in touch with it, which is a shame. I mean, we know that ourselves. No matter how horrible the things they did, there's still the possibility that they might one day, you know, take a look in the mirror and say, oh my God, I behave totally in opposition to what I am, what I am. My theologies change, as you've read in the book, as I age too, and as my experiences change. I'm at the point where I believe that, that we are God, that God is in, and that we have the power that Jesus invited us to have. We just haven't necessarily touched it, but there are people in history who have, Jesus being one of them. I think the incarnation, what was important about Jesus' life and death is that he showed us that it was possible as a human being to reach a level of awareness, because otherwise it's, masochism and sadism to follow something you can't
Mhm.
possibly be. But so this is a question people would want to know your answer to, as trite as you may find it to be. Uh, do you believe, given Pope Leo and his statement that marriage is for a man and a woman, which is the Church's sexual theology, do you believe that the Church's sexual theology will ever change?
Yes. Yes. I could say I wouldn't be doing the work that I'm doing if I didn't believe the church's teaching on human sexuality would evolve. I always like to joke, the church's teaching never changes until it does. And the fact is that it does, right? And there are many, many watershed moments in the church's understanding of the world, understanding of God, that reveal this, right? We think of the Copernican revolution, right? When the church had to reconcile itself to modern understandings of the universe, right? And of physics and astronomy. I think of Vatican II, right? The middle of the 20th century, a watershed moment for the church when the church finally accepted things like democracy and freedom of conscience. I mean, if you go back even to the 19th century, the church is arguing for a theocratic vision of government around the world, right? That the Pope is up here, secular leaders are down here, and then everybody else is down here. The church is condemning democracy. The church is condemning freedom of religion. Why? Because the Catholic Church has the truth, and why should you want to go anywhere else? All of this radically transforms in the middle of the 20th century at Vatican II as the church is grappling with questions of pluralism, right? And seeing the effects of autocracy around the world. I mean, World War II was really, really horrific, and the lessons that the church carried from World War II and the Holocaust into Vatican II were really, really impactful on its development of church teaching and its understanding, right? So today we take for granted that Catholics can support democracy. And, you know, right now the Catholic Church is one of the most vocal proponents of democracy around the world, especially as regimes here in our own United States are embracing, you know, non-democratic policies and actions. So I think that's really important. And on the church's teaching on sexuality, right now there's a huge disconnect between the church's official teaching and how people are living their lives, right? Ordinary Catholics, both LGBTQ and straight, are living their lives in a way that doesn't conform to the church's teaching. So straight folks, right? About 95% of Catholic women at some point in their lives use contraception, which according to the church's teaching is a mortal sin, right? Just like me having sex with another man might be a mortal sin, or masturbation, or whatever the case might be. And so the fact that so few Catholics actually follow church teaching, I think is an untenable situation. You know, the official line is there, but if ordinary Catholics don't pay attention to it, nobody really cares about it. People are still experiencing God. People still are participating in their parishes, still living full Catholic lives. How meaningful is what's on the books? And I think for me, as a Catholic theologian, I'm kind of ambivalent about this distance between the church's official teaching and the way that people live their sexual lives. On one hand, I think it's a sign of a really unhealthy tradition, right? That we still have these rules on the books, and many bishops, you know, talk about never changing. And I don't think that's necessarily good. But on the other hand, it opens up a space for real creativity, right? And real life to flourish when, again, nobody's taking it seriously in the first place. And I think this is a really Catholic thing. We sort of embrace living our lives. No matter what the church says, we're going to do our thing. We're going to follow our consciences. And there's no pretending that any of us are reading the catechism line for line and applying it to our lives. Because, again, it's just really quite irrelevant at this point. And so I think at some point there will be, right now there's sort of a shift in grassroots opinions, perspective. So a lot of LGBTQ people can feel welcome and loved in the parishes where they're at. More and more churches are hiring openly LGBTQ people, right? There's been a revolution in university settings like where I work. And I think eventually it's going to filter up to the hierarchy, right? The change that's happened now at the grassroots level is going to change the church's official teaching. Just to show just how much the grassroots level has changed, here in the United States, 70% of grassroots Catholics support same-sex marriage, which puts us just at or even slightly above mainline Protestant churches, right? And so the Catholic Church is on board, and it's just a matter of time, I believe, before the hierarchy catches up.
And I think, you know, when the hierarchy catches up, it never looks pretty.
Yes.
You know, change, we've all experienced change in our individual lives. It's never pretty.
Right.
The,
Well,
I was just going to say the whole, um, your whole journey, uh, as mine, raises the question, what is a Catholic? You know, uh, the recent Pew study that says only 30% of Catholics believe in transubstantiation. The other 60% believe that the bread and wine are symbolic, just like, every other church, every Protestant church believes that, including the Episcopalians. So if you don't, and I would guess the overwhelming don't go to confession once a year. The things that the church says are musts in order to be a Catholic. I came to the point of saying in my life, you can't tell me that I'm not Catholic. You know, given I know my life does not reflect uh, much of Catholic teaching, but I'm still Catholic, as are all the people like me, who are out there. The studies, Jason and Haley, that say that the fastest growing group of people are people who say they're non-affiliated to a religion, and atheists quote that figure as if not affiliated means they're atheists. And I say, no, it just means that there are tons of people out there who are practicing their own spirituality. They meditate, they light incense, they have an experience of God, but they're just not doing it as a Methodist.
yeah, I want to also recognize that the way people identify as Catholic or not does go in multiple directions, So this last election, more Catholics than not voted for Donald Trump, and Catholics have rejected the church's teaching on immigration, right, which calls for the welcoming and acceptance of all people. So it's not always clear, right, that holding Catholic teaching is a good thing or a bad thing, popular versus unpopular. I don't think it's always a good gauge for discerning what's right and what's wrong, what should be accepted and what shouldn't be accepted. Um, it is ultimately, I think, a deeply personal question of values, but also broader culture. And so I just wanted to sort of say that too, because again, just because the majority of Catholics think something is good, Donald Trump, right, hurting immigrants, doesn't necessarily make it so.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, we're talking a lot about God. And when did you first sort of become aware of your alignment with God?
Yeah.
Well, that there was this God entity.
So growing up in an evangelical Protestant church, it was a very fundamental part of my upbringing. So I went to Sunday school, right, for all of my life. Belief in God was something that was expected. It was something that was built into the way that we thought, we believed, right? We talked, the way we lived our lives. Um, one of the fundamental questions growing up evangelical is, are you going to heaven or hell? Do you have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ? Are you saved? And that question really, really dominated a lot of my childhood. I would have these very, very emotional experiences in the church of God or of God's movement, right? Thinking places like retreats or praise and worship in church. And looking back on that now, to be honest, I wonder if that was God. I think there was a lot of really good emotional manipulation going on. And I think as I matured, that was one of my major struggles with my belief in God, right? Is this something that is real, or is it something that my community, my family, my church expects me to be experiencing and to be feeling? And to be honest, I still struggle with that question today. I'm not too sure. And
I think we need.
yeah, oh yeah, Yeah,
I think we
absolutely.
need that part of us to always question because then we're still seeking the truth.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. But to be honest, the further I've gone along, I'm now a theologian. This is my livelihood. This is what I say is my vocation. I still do have major, major struggles, major, major doubts, right? Is what I believe about God what I believe about myself, right? That I'm created in the image of God, that as Brian shared, right, that God is a part of me, or maybe even I am God or on my way to becoming like God. Right? I sometimes wonder if any of it's true. I wonder if we're making it all up, right? To make ourselves feel
Mhm.
better about our finitude, our limited nature, the fact I'm gonna die, right? I want a security that there's something after death, that there's something bigger than me, right? I even today I'll have mystical experiences sometimes, walking in the fall when the sun hits the leaves at a certain angle and leaves fall from the trees. I'm overcome, I'm overwhelmed, right? I have this impulse to fall to the ground, right? And begin to worship. And so these parts of me are called outside of myself, right? I do have transcendent experiences in my relationships with others. I'm part of a singing community. When we get together and sing, there's something beautiful and graced about that. But again, part of me does wonder: is it just me, right, reacting as a sort of organic, chemical being, whatever's going on in my mind? Is it all just physical, material, and nothing transcendent? But what I can say for certain, and maybe this is what I've built my career as a theologian, is that I want to live in a world where the possibility of belief in God, the possibility of belief in transcendence is possible. I
Mm.
I I don't want to I don't want to be an atheist. My world is happier, my world is brighter because I'm open to the transcendent and to the divine. And
Well,
I don't want to close myself off to that.
well, there's your proof. That uh, I abandoned the idea that God was an entity, outside of me who's watching and, who on occasion will give me what I need to do what I need to do. I believe the Holy Spirit, it runs through all, Holy Spirit is God, runs through all living things, the leaves that fell on the ground, that's Holy Spirit. But even if it's not, yeah, even if they're that, we're imagining things that are not, you know, true, all of us who have those transcendent experiences feel better about the world and about ourselves. And that's grace, or joy or love. Uh, if suddenly it was proven to all of us that there is no such thing as God, you know, I'm still going to be a loving, kind person because I feel that I'm at my best when I'm a loving, kind person and that my life has value. Uh, I know I'm going to be forgotten. I know that uh, all the things that I thought were, they were important, but and I credit in the book the Holy Spirit doing all of it. I'm just a channel. But I think even if there was no God, in terms of outside force, that I'd still be the same person. I don't live in fear. I don't have any I don't have any belief in hell. I'm not quite sure what heaven is. Whether we all just mesh back and forth and become the sea again. We go back and forth. I don't know, but I don't care. My joy, the joy is in the giving. And so when I'm focused on the well-being of the world and the people around me, that is God. I mean, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that is uh and the people call the Tao is, flows through all of us, and is in us. And I believe that we are God. That that's what Jesus taught us. So I don't think the focus is on can we prove there's something out there. I think the focus is on how do I manifest it?
Right, right. And what difference does that make in the world today, too? And I think for me, religion of all stripes, theologies of all stripes are proven, right, in day-to-day life. Um, what's happening? How is this changing me? How is this changing the world? Like you said, Brian, how can I be a force for good? Whatever my religious, whatever my theological perspectives are. And sometimes theology, religion can be a really helpful framing and a really helpful way of motivating, right? Change. I think religion is a huge, huge resource, can be a huge benefit, but also it's an obstacle sometimes, right?
Hmm.
Religion and theology aren't unmitigated goods. I mean, we've all seen ways that religion has hurt people,
Hmm.
destroyed lives. I mean, God, as a gay man, I see this all the time. People's spiritual lives die because of religion and the way God gets, I would argue, misinterpreted, right? But
Mhm.
as a theologian, as a person of conscience, as someone who cares about the world, um, I also think religion can be a powerful force for personal and communal transformation.
Well, I believe that religion is a tool, and it's there to sort of, if it resonates with you, it's a tool to help you create that personal relationship with God or whatever that power is. And I think that, I had this wonderful teacher when I was reconciling with God, and I used to have an enormous amount of anger towards God. And she would say that we're so focused on sort of the negative stories, we never are open to the positive stories. And one of the reasons for that is because there are so many positive, happy stories in the world every single day. There's just not enough time and space to publish all of that. There is a small amount of negativity, and there's time and space to publish that.
Right. Because good news doesn't sell newspapers.
Well, and I think it's just too much. I think, like, if we think we're overwhelmed with information right now, imagine if everybody just started publishing the great things that happened every single day and said, breaking news, I had the best day ever. We would
Uh-huh.
be overwhelmed. So I think, we choose, and sometimes based on sort of where we're coming from and our perspectives and biases, we choose where we get information from. And I think, to Jason's point, there's some of us that are like, I choose to believe that this world is of love and that we are here to make a difference for love. And that feels better for me. I think the majority of the world feels the same thing. They feel good when they're doing good things.
Yes, including atheists. You know,
Everybody, everybody. And sometimes we can look at their behavior and be like, how does that make you feel good? They're still coming from this mindset of what they're doing is a form of love. They're doing it to protect themselves for whatever reason, which I don't think we have the time or space or comprehension to go into that today. But I think, ultimately all humans have our wonderful bodies to feel good and to choose, okay, that's how I want to feel, so I'm going to continue to do that.
and Jason, for you to have transcendent experiences means that you're at a level of understanding that allows you to see it as transcendent. I've had the same experience, and it happens in nature. Where I'm just in awe, and so many. I was thinking this morning that in guiding people towards an awareness of something higher than themselves, to pick one thing and every day look at it with gratitude and awe, whether it's a tree or a flowering bush or the neighbors next door who are just amazing, but that we give gratitude and give love every opportunity that we have. Jason, I had one question for you. If this doesn't work out, will you go back into politics?
I've thought about it. You know, right now though, my life feels really full and of good things, of community, of learning, right? Of faith. And so if it doesn't work out, I think I would think about it. I often joke that, undergrad at Georgetown, I was a double major in political science, government, and theology. And I added theology as a degree because political science wasn't political enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, Boy, it's like if you can handle the world of theology, you can definitely handle the world of politics, because they're both very, very human affairs. So yeah, I've thought about it. Maybe it's a dream for later on or whenever the opportunity presents itself. Right now, I'm living in Brooklyn, so there are sort of particular local characteristics of what politics look like, and New York is, very, very big city. So it would take some work getting involved, but yeah, I've definitely thought of it. I've had friends and mentors over the years who have provided opportunities, talked about it, encouraged me, but we'll see.
I think you're much more powerful as a spiritual leader than you would be a political one. We can see that politics is uh, stopping good people in the Democratic Party from doing anything to stop Trump. But you can take spirituality and teach and role model in a way that makes Trump irrelevant. He's irrelevant.
Perhaps that's the evolution of politics. It becomes more spiritual, becomes more aligned with sort of truth.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes,
And I think
I do believe that we are always moving towards truth. It just sometimes doesn't look pretty.
mm,
Jason,
And
I
I
want to
think,
ask, you mentioned earlier on, sort of, you noticed that sort of not many people were now going to college. There's sort of been this drop off of people going to college. In your time as a professor, do you see any trends with the people that are in college? Like, are their questions going a certain way, or are they more open minded or not? Do you see any trends that way in the people that you have the benefits of being with and teaching?
yeah, Brian noted earlier the rise of the nuns, right? Those who don't affiliate with any religious tradition. And I've seen that even in the 10 years that I've been teaching, an increase in the numbers of students who identify as nun. There's also an increase in students who just don't care about religion or spirituality or find that it has any effect on their lives at all. So
mhm.
I find most of the work now as a theology professor is communicating to students or helping them discover the ways in their own lives in which religion, faith, spirituality are relevant. Because for so many of them, it's just not a concern. It doesn't enter into their imagination, into their worldview at all. And so I think this is one of the great challenges for theologians and also scholars of religion, religious studies folks, is saying, hey, we see this world supposedly becoming more secular, the rise of the nuns, etc. What role does religion continue to play, maybe sometimes in surprising ways, unexpected ways? But yeah, so that's been sort of my main observation about students is that, again, religion just doesn't really touch their lives. And how do we encourage them to find the ways that it does or that it might? And not just religion, but also spirituality, right? How do we handle the major questions that humans face? Finitude, purpose, relationality. All these things are really, really relevant, and I think it's helping students uncover that.
And where does Chat GPT fit into that?
Oh no! Here I'm waxing eloquent about ideals and up in the stratosphere.
I ask this question because I'm very in my world right now. AI and Chat GPT is very much in my world. Not that I ever wanted it. It's sort of, those wonderful synchronistics where my clients are now saying, hey, I Googled Chat GPT and it told me this. Well, we don't Google Chat GPT, we have a conversation. And so there's this movement now, this transference of learning from AI. How is that impacting your teaching, and can you see it in sort of the papers that your students are writing?
Yes, thank you for bringing me back down to earth. Absolutely, and it's been a real struggle. It's been a real struggle. I and most of my colleagues do not see artificial intelligence as being helpful for the learning process. right? I see a lot of students who will just plug prompts into ChatGPT and then turn in a paper written straight from there.
And you can tell, I'm assuming you can tell.
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. You know, students using language that undergraduate students would never use, and especially when I'm grading, you know, maybe 20 or 30 papers, and 5 or 6 of them almost say the same exact thing verbatim. You realize that sort of the structures, the ways of thinking, the sources are all coming from one source. And AI writing, at least when my students are presenting it, it does come across as very plastic, as unhuman, inhuman. It's not the reflection of a 19-year-old who's struggling with life's big questions, right? And I find it really sad and tragic that we've allowed learning to be reduced to this thing where students put prompts into a computer program and then it spits out something that can be acceptable in a university setting. You know, I think the work of my classes, I hope, is to challenge students to think more deeply about who they are, about who they want to be. I am firmly in the humanities, right? As a faculty member, I think that these questions are really fundamental. And when we ask computers what it means to be human, we're not going to get a human answer, and we're not going to learn about ourselves, right? We're not going to grow in the ways that education ought to challenge us to grow. So for the most part, I find AI as being a distraction, as an inhibitor of true learning, of true growth. I tell my students, look, turn in a paper that you've written, even if it's messy, even if it has all the grammatical errors, because it shows that you're trying, that you care, that you're a human being, right? That you can make mistakes, and that you have original thoughts. And AI is none of those things. None of those things.
I wonder whether or not we're fighting a battle that we're never going to win. You know, every generation of teenagers discovers their own new thing. And when people older than them suggest to them that it's, don't use that, you know, put away your cell phone. You know, if no one tells them to put away their cell phone, they're going to be on it, right? And once they get away from you and your rules, they're going to be on it, right? So instead of trying to stop it from happening, because it is happening. I mean, on the computer, you can create a boyfriend. You can create the person's looks, and that person will show up every single day to talk to you, right? And so some very lonely people will do that. You know, they hunger for a relationship. They'll never get one, uh, but in the means that they're trying to. So they go to AI and create it. I let go of it. I seriously, I'm over the period of shaking my head. Yeah. Because all I can do ultimately is role model. You know, I can, even on the religion thing, when I post something on Facebook, and I'll be quick, that's religious, I get very few likes. Uh, Put a picture of
Mm-hmm.
Sebastian on it, and I'll get 400. You know, it's people aren't generally interested in religion, and the word God sends people into apoplexy, you know, because it just brings up all sorts of things that they hate and don't want to talk about, or they're angry at you for talking about. So instead of talking about religion, I can be Brian McNaught, who I admire, who hasn't let go of his faith. I wonder why not. I wonder what he's got that makes him so sure about this. And you know, that's I think what our role is. Um, with our own garden, you know,
Mhm.
with the people who stack the shelves of the grocery store, the guy at 7-Eleven who you give your credit card to for the gas. That's our garden. And that's where we're kind and loving. And that's what's going to defeat all the negativity. If we're all doing it, it's going to defeat the negativity that, seems to be creeping in the world.
We have like 3 more minutes, so I wanted to know, Jason, if you had any last minute thoughts or questions, words.
Yeah, just I really appreciate this conversation. It's been wonderful to dialogue with both of you, to hear some of your own perspectives, to share some of my own. I think one of the themes that's been very prominent is the ambiguity of religion in today's
Mhm.
world, and to be able to wrestle with that honestly is a gift, because usually people are either all in or they're all out. So what a pleasure, right, to talk about these things with nuance and thoughtfulness.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
absolutely agree. And sort of when I do get those chat GPT questions, my initial reaction is like, oh Lord, what are we doing? What are you doing? And then it's immediately I'm like, oh, this is fun. This is fun. Because it is that opportunity not only for me to seek the truth, but also to open questions for those people that are using sort of those tools and have those kind of questions to really question within.
Mhm.
Jason, we really thank you for putting
Thank you.
yourself, yeah. And, maybe not too long in the future, we'll see if you want to come back and keep
Yeah,
the
I feel like we have so
conversation.
much more to talk about.
Yeah, keep the conversation going. This podcast will be up forever. It's on YouTube, it's on 3 different sites, on Facebook. So, send people to listen to your interview, because I think it's important that, because you're not going to go back and listen to this. I never listen to anything, videos I've done, talks I've given. I don't go back. But so you may not, but send people to it. Send your students to it, because it's a terrific discussion about spirituality and religion. Um, so, at any rate,
Yeah,
you're
I
a great
really have a
guy.
question for you for our next session, which would be where do consciousness and God intersect?
Mm. That might be above my pay grade, but I'll give it a shot. I'll give it a
Might be above your pay
shot.
grade, but not above you.
Well,
Thank
I
you
love
so
you
much for
both.
today, wonderful people, and we
Yeah.
will see you soon.
All right, sounds good. Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you all.